Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Notes from the Pastor Cave. And I'm so glad that you are joining us here today. We have the door open, some pretty warm summer weather, a little cooler in the Pastor Cave because it is a cave. And so we are kind of enjoying that. I wanted to point out, from time to time, I bring, new little characters onto the scene here. This one here is particularly interesting. I have this friend, Bonnie, and Bonnie has this gift, and her gift is that she goes out and she finds small rocks. Maybe a little bigger than this, maybe a little smaller than this, but she finds small rocks, and she is able to kind of envision something that they look like. And then she paints them because she is very artistic and very clever. She paints them, and they end up looking like what she envisioned. So you have rocks that look like ladybugs, and rocks that look like lizards, and just all kinds of other things. Now this one is a creative piece, which I found quite comical. And she actually went ahead and named that. I don't think she ordinarily names her artistic works, but this one is called Pastor on Monday Morning. This is what she told me. She said this one is called Pastor on Monday Morning, and I think she pretty much nailed it. That's pretty much. I may not look exactly like that on Monday morning, but I kind of feel like that on Monday morning. So thank you, Bonnie. I've had this quite a while. It hangs around various places of the house, and it's a nice little addition to what we do around here. I want to get back at least one more time to Exodus chapter 20. Yeah, because I don't think I gave it quite as much of the treatment that I wanted to. I think I have a piece of feather in my eye. I didn't want to. I didn't quite give it the full treatment because our perception of Exodus 20 is the Ten Commandments, and obviously that's kind of the subject that sucks everything out of the room, all the air out of the room, because it is such an important moment, and I don't want to take away from the importance of that moment in any way, shape, or form. But when you read the whole chapter, which isn't much longer after the commandments are over, we have verses like 22 through 26, right? So it's not that big after that. But what God does is He goes from these laws, we can call them rules if we want to, that as a community that is trying to survive, as a community that is hopefully trying to please God, because really these rules, these laws, these commandments are based on a people who want them. All right. So if you're just gonna try to stick to these commandments as something dry and rote, without the God factor in there, it's gonna fail you. Okay. You can't just take them as laws without the spirit of the law behind them. Okay, and that's really what happens here is at the end of the chapter that I just want to go over this again because it's so incredibly important. What goes on in the rest of the chapter is God talking about relationship, and I just find that when I became a follower of Christ before my 13th birthday, okay. And I find that there are aspects of what I believe that they're just coming to fruition now in my life. And these last 5-10 years, I've begun to realize so much more than I ever did before. I read it and I processed it, but it didn't get down to the heart, right? That this is really all about relationship. And God has produced these commandments, and these commandments are very important. But they're only part of what he's saying here in chapter 20, that this whole thing in its entirety, not just the piece that is the rules, the piece that is the law, but the whole thing in its entirety is based on a community of people who are in relationship to Yahweh, Yahweh the Great, Yahweh the one and only God. And it just, and as you begin to realize that, there is something very beautiful that starts to emerge from all of this. That is much more than just a dry set of rules and oh boy, I got to follow somebody's rules. Wow, there's so much more to it than that. And this is why it's so important for him when God says, look, don't make graven images. Don't make stuff out of wood and stone or even gold, because it can't talk back to you. You can't have a relationship with that. And that translates, as I said in the last video, that translates to us today. We think of ourselves as so much more sophisticated than we used to be. Oh, I would never pray to a golden statue, but I'll pray to the stock market. Well, maybe I don't pray to the stock market, but I put my faith and my trust in the stock market. And there are all these things. I put my faith in my pleasure. I put my faith in my hobbies. I put my faith. You realize how unfair it is for you to put your faith in your spouse, to look at them in a godlike way, and expect them to be perfect. Nobody can stand up to that. Okay, so we make plenty of idols. I mean, I could spend the next 20 minutes talking about the idols that we create in our modern day society, which I think are actually, they far outnumber the idols of the past. God says, don't do these things, because this is about relationship, and you can't have a relationship with a stick. You just can't. All right, or a piece of wood, block of stone. You can't have a relationship with that. Okay, and I just want to add on to this, right? And God says, look, you keep these laws, these commandments, I will come to you. I'll keep coming to you. And really, right in here, think about this. Right in here is a little promise of the coming of a Messiah, right? That I'm going to come to you. You do these things. You become the godly community that I am requiring you to become, and I will send my society, my Messiah, the ultimate expression of me coming to you. I will send my Messiah to you and through you to bless the whole world. And then verse 25 says this. It says, if you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it with hewn stones. In other words, don't put any blades to it. For if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. If you wield your tool on it, you profane it. Okay, so what God wanted was just very plain altars that no one would come along and say, "Oh, I want to worship that altar." Just stacks of stones. Don't put a tool to it. Don't try to cut straight lines on it or anything. It just used plain old stones that are there available to you, and we see this happening over and over again in the Old Testament. But how often do we take the plain, beautiful acts of God, or the plain, beautiful will of God, something that God wants to do through us, and we try to put our own mark on it? When we do that, we profane it. When we take what God wants to do and we decide that we're going to insert our personality into it, or I'm gonna I'll give God the glory, but I'd like a little bit of the glory for what I'm doing, right? As soon as we do that, we try to cut the stone of the altar that God wants us to create, and we profane it. And how many things are we profaning? All across our land or lands, or an international audience. How many things are we profaning because we insist on putting some of our humanity, our broken humanity, into something that God is trying to do? It's a terrible thing. And how often do we take this law and we make it all about law? We make it all about the rules, and we forget the rest of the chapter where God is talking about relationship. This law is a doorway, is all it is. It's a doorway into bringing us into a right relationship with God. It's really just a beginning in many ways. But when we separate it out and we make it, whether we're going to call it Christianity or Judaism or whatever name we want to put on it, when we take that thing and we make it just about the rules and we forget about the relationship, then, Paul, I love the way Paul says this. Paul said, he comes right out and says it. He says, I used to preach the law. I used to preach the rules, and I preached death. I mean, it doesn't, Paul just doesn't, he's flowery, but he doesn't beat around the bush, right? I used to do this, and I preached death. Now I preach grace, and I preach life, okay? So even Paul understands, as a former preacher of law, that the full picture is not just the rules. The rules are important. But the full picture is law and grace brings relationship, okay? Relationship with God. So let's remember to sprinkle our conversations with grace. Let's remember to live with grace even as we follow law. And let's remember that when we try to put human will into what God is doing, that we are actually profaning what God is trying to do. All right? That's it for today. Have a great day. God bless you. Vita, brevis, gloria, aeterna. Life is short and glory is eternal.